Next, it's a topic that is dear to us all, GDPR. Welcome, welcome, Jari. Hey.
So, good afternoon also from my side, and I'm happy to talk here today as a CEO of the European Games Developer Federation on things that are going to happen after the GDPR is already now in force. So, EGDF is the umbrella trade organization of the European games industry. We represent 17 trade associations from 17 different European countries that altogether represent more than 2,000 game developer studios that employ over 25,000 people. So today I'm going to talk about GDPR and consumer protection and data privacy and these kind of topics. And most likely this will be one of the most boring presentations in Dev.Play this year. And it's also a topic that's really nice to ignore, because let's face it, there are better things to focus on when you are making games, but these are still something to focus on if you want to make a game that actually is scalable and can be delivered to the global markets. And it's easy to think it's from a simple perspective. This is how many people, especially outside games industry, think games work. Like, game developer makes a game, it's then downloaded to a device and a player plays it. Unfortunately, reality is something like this. So we have data streams. Well, data is basically going everywhere. We have application going to the device through an application store instead of directly from the developer. We have content streams, we have information streams, we have infrastructure in the background, and money is flowing from a player through a payment service to application store at a game developer studio. And then there's user-generated content causing all kinds of challenges. And all these flows are somehow regulated. There is increasing accessibility rules emerging, especially if you're doing something with the public sector. There are copyright rules, protection of minors rules, geo-blocking and portability. Topics are not having a big impact now, but may have in the future. Freedom of arts, of course, like what kind of games you can make, hate speech and terroristic content, gambling regulation, AI and algorithms being regulated, data protection, e-privacy, etc., etc., etc. So there is actually lots of regulation that game developer studios are facing all the time. So it's perhaps something to have at least a general understanding of. So ignorance is a bliss, but who is unaware of the law may not escape the liability for violating that law. So it's definitely something to follow. The second topic is the fact that games markets are global. And when we talk about global games market, this is usually what we think in games industry. We have statistics for Europe, Africa, and Middle East, EMEA region. We have statistics for Asia, statistics for North America and Latin America. When we ask it same question from the policymakers, this is how they see the global games markets. You have EU as one area, big free trade areas in North America and South America, and of course China and India being big players there. And this is the reality. The global markets are really getting regulatory fragmented. In EU, there are more or less coherent rules, but even in North America, United States, and Canada are going different direction, and even in the United States, certain states have a little bit different approach on data protection, for example. So there's lots of regulation, and it's getting fragmented on the global level. So, but there are luckily 5 big trends emerging now that are kind of helping you. First of all, this is something that you have to do. The legal expertise is becoming something that is not only for legal experts, it's actually general industry knowledge. Like, everyone in a game developer studio should have at least a general idea about data protection rules in Europe, and perhaps even have a general idea how COPPA in the United States works, if you are making a game that has children as a players. And also game engines are now waking up. Unity is going to launch this kind of modular package, helping you to get GDPR consents and handling the privacy topics as part of game engine. So also from that side, you are receiving some help. Platforms are stepping in. They are taking a little bit more responsibility year by year on different kind of regulatory implementation things, especially on taxation side. So only like 6 years ago, you had to pay VAT in a number of countries. Now platforms are taking care of that on your behalf because EU forced them to do that. Then there is of course a Chinese model. So we see regional publishers emerging, not only in China, but now you need to have one in Vietnam as well. And increasingly, if you go to the United States, there might be good reason to use a publisher there helping you to sort out some challenges. Especially for the big companies, legal consulting companies are new gatekeepers. They are actually using lots of money on Ernst & Young, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and these kind of companies and actually enter the global markets. What we as a trade associations are doing, we are fighting at the moment to still keep the digital global markets free for the trading. On that side, OECD, for example, is now harmonizing taxation rules, and there are many initiatives on the consumer protection side to harmonize the rules. So the situation is no way hopeless, but it's getting trickier, and the days of the wild, wild web are definitely over. So game markets are global, but regulation is local, and there is lots of fear-mongering always going on about new regulations emerging. But I would really recommend that you only start to worry about these things when you have a date when they're actually going to be implemented. So now I will go through from 2020 and 2021 4 key pieces of new EU regulation that you perhaps should have a look on. In about 7 months from now, we will have a new rights for you, actually. The new platform regulation from the European Union enters into force, and what that means is that when your worst nightmare happens, you wake up one morning and Google sends you a message, sorry, we have taken down your game from our app store because we don't like it. And then you're wondering what to do now. This happened for the Norwegian game developer studio last spring, and their game was just taken down from European App Store, and that was their main market, and they were, of course, really scared what is going to happen. They had to go to press and start this kind of public campaign, and in the end, Google returned the game to the App Store and said, sorry, we have very bit too strict on the content, and didn't understand that it was artistic game and not just exploiting some ideas they don't want to have in their App Store. So, from June next year, App Stores have to inform you 30 days before if they are going to take down your game. And after that, you have an access to internal complaint handling mechanisms where you can send a message to Apple or Google or any platform taking down your game that we don't agree what you are doing, and please return our game to the App Store. And the best part of it is that they have to reply to you. So at least there will be some way to sort out the problems. In addition, there are new data access rights. Basically, they have to disclose to you how they are using the data they are collecting from your games. It was really strange from GDPR entering into force. On this week, GDPR was introduced, and everything has to implement it. One of the big mobile platforms sent for the developer a message that here is our SDK. Implement it, don't look inside, trust on us. We are GDPR compliant. So that side is going to get a little bit better because you will have an overview how Google, Apple, or any platform is using the data from your players, not just personal data. And what is really interesting for Google Stadia especially, because Google also has now their own game developer studios, that any kind of differentiated treatment has to be transparent. So if you want to start an 8-year-long competition case against Google, you will have some kind of basis for that in the future. And also ranking algorithms should be more transparent. How? That is something that we will have a meeting in Brussels this year still to figure it out. But in any case, there should be more knowledge how they will work. And the main takeaway from here is the fact that it should help you to actually kill this kind of all kinds of rumors how these algorithms actually work. And in the future, terms and conditions must be drafted in a plain and intelligible language. At the moment, if you look on your developer agreement, it might be drafted in a language that even your lawyer doesn't understand, so that should end. So, 3 months later, there will be new rules for influencer marketing when the new Audiovisual Media Service Directive enters into force. Basically, this has a big impact on any kind of commercial communication on video sharing platforms, meaning Twitch and YouTube, where you have influencers. So they have to be transparent about commercial communication. And the challenge on that side is that most of the influencers might not be the most professionals when it comes to this kind of things, so it's on your responsibility to remind them that they have to disclose that this is sponsored content, that you have given the game for them, or you have invited them to visit your studio or so on. And it has to be clearly visible in all kind of videos. They cannot be any kind of direct exhort to minors to buy a game. So if the influencer has a young audience, they cannot say that buy this game. They can recommend it, but they cannot order their young children or child audience to actually go to shop and buy your game. And no, there cannot be any kind of tobacco ads. This might be for esports events sometimes a challenge. One of the open questions is age ratings for games broadcasted in the television. Luckily, the Finnish broadcasting agency is thinking that a game that is PG-18 would be still okay to be for audience over 16 as linear content in the TV. But that's going to be a country-by-country case, how the public television is going to see the age ratings for games and how they match with the linear age ratings. Then, 1 year later, in 2021, we will have new rights for employees and subcontractors when the new directive on copyright in the digital signal market enters into force. First big thing that just to kind of get prepared of that we don't really know how it's going to work is what kind of impact this kind of new rules for platforms to take down content that is violating someone's copyright and that they don't have licenses on will impact on viral marketing and influencer marketing. Already now, algorithms watching this kind of illegal content online are sometimes taking down also content that should be shared and video game developers want to be shared. The problem with this piece of text is that it was agreed in a very late night somewhere in the last spring, and if you wonder what that piece of text means, that's a good question, because last Monday I was at a meeting in Brussels where there are 100 very clever people trying to figure out an answer to that question. So we are now in the phase where licensing societies are saying that Google and Apple, Google and all other social media platforms have to have licenses on all possible content on Earth, and content they not have a license on has to be taken down. Whereas we as a game representing game developer studios are saying that the solution cannot hinder viral or influencer marketing in no way, and the algorithms have to be very relaxed, and obviously there is some work to do. It will have an impact. What kind of impact remains to be seen, but there might be some surprises ahead. So, something that is also going to raise lots of concerns and has already raised is the fact that employees of game developer studios will have a right to renegotiate their contract if they feel that they haven't received high enough remuneration compared to success of the game. This sounds scary, but this rule has existed in Finland, for example, over years now. It hasn't been a big issue in reality. So, depending on how this will be sorted out on national level, there might be some kind of joint agreement, what is a fair remuneration and so on. In all cases, if you have some kind of stock option program, for example, existing, that would solve most of the problems. And if you will have an exclusive rights for a book or something and you are not using them, that might cause also some challenges. Because then the author can come to you and say that you are not using my book on anything, I want to have my rights back. But in the end, the biggest topic for game developer studios in the copyright directive and new copyright regulation is the transparency requirement. It will require quite a lot of work from game developer studios actually to track who has contributed in a game and report the final success of the games for all of these people. It will require changes in the human resources management systems that aren't fit with this, and unfortunately the systems don't really exist at the moment. There are a number of service providers at the moment looking for Bitcoin or this kind of blockchain-based solutions for this, so that might be the future. We'll see how it works, but definitely in 2 years' time there will be a time to review your human resources management structures and reporting principles, because you have to be able to report for all the people who contributed in your game, how much, what kind of profits that game in the end generated once a year. So, also in 2021 it's time to rewrite terms and conditions, because new contracts on digital content services will enter into force. First of all, what was success in the lobbying side, that still, if you are an amateur developer, you can publish a game to the markets without being subject of the consumer protection rules, but it means that the game has to be provided under open license. What will be a bigger challenge, especially if your company representatives are going to speak in events like this, all the promises they are making about the features of the game will be counted as promises. So if you are creating a hype about your game or how cool it will be, what kind of functions it will have, and later on the players find out that they are not in the game, they have a right to ask their money back, unless you have corrected these statements on somewhere on your website. So it definitely requires some changes in the ways people are speaking about the games. Then there are some minor changes. So you have to provide access to all the data they have provided. Basically this means beyond personal data like pictures or something like that on the photo platforms. On game side it's a bit unclear what this means, but I would assume that some people will approach this from the perspective that you have to be able to download some kind of save file of the game situation and then delete the content, but keep the somehow your progress in a game secured. But that is already existing number of platforms, so that's not be a big issue. And what is the biggest thing at that point of time is that the contracts have to specifically allow major modifications of digital content, meaning that in somewhere in the 2021 you have to rewrite your terms and conditions to be in line with the new rules. And that unfortunately means some legal fees for that year. So, what next? There are lots of this kind of brave new ideas at the moment discussed by policymakers. They are talking about new digital taxation, how that will come into effect. There will be topics about regulation of artificial intelligence, and lots of headlines about that. But until it's decided what the rules will be, until you actually have the final piece of regulation, keep calm and carry on, because what we have seen, for example, with e-privacy regulation that has been now negotiated for like 5, 6, 8 years, the content of it has changed all the time, and so it's don't start to react on something that hasn't been decided yet. So there will be lots of new initiatives on the table, on the state aid rules, digital taxation, consumer protection rules, and e-privacy and immigration rules. So EU is definitely going forward. And new ideas are related to artificial intelligence, regulating it, Green New Deal, Digital Service Act, meaning new responsibilities for the platforms, and gender quotas for company boards and minimum wage for everyone. But I would say these are the things that will be somewhere in the end of 2020s. these are the things that maybe reality somewhere 2030 is considering all the time it takes to actually agree on these things. So don't panic. But the fact that something is not regulated doesn't mean that you should not think about it, because all these topics we are seeing now in the future are something that you have to start thinking about. So first big issue is that focus is moving from the new rules to the implementation guidelines. So GDPR is a good example of what the regulation in the future will look like. The regulation will give a general idea how you should be acting and lets you to decide how to fulfill the requirements. This of course means that there will be more and more guidelines on what this piece of regulation actually means in different contexts. It is definitely now time to go green. There will be some regulation about this emerging now, but already now a number of game developer studios are actually carbon offsetting all the CO2 emissions the players are causing by playing their games. Supercell and Rovio from Finland, for example. So it's definitely something to start thinking without even a regulation in force. Then GDPR is going global. So there is a Californian Consumer Privacy Act in California entering the force at the end of this year, impacting bigger studios. And there is one in Japan. Latin America is introducing rules like GDPR, and the problem is that all these rules are almost like GDPR, but not exactly. But if you are GDPR compliant, following the GDPR rules, you are more or less on the safe side. There might be some details you have to take into account, but it's not a big job. But if you are not GDPR compliant, there's lots of work for you to do. AI will be regulated in one way or another during the next 10 years. So it's time to start thinking about what AI ethics, transparency, and accountability would mean in a game developer context. It will be a difficult debate, but something definitely we have to start in the games industry as well, and I was happy to see this kind of debate already last year in Dev.Play. Responsibilities of platforms and intermediaries will increase on hate speech, terroristic content, copyright infringement, and sometimes this also means game developer studios when you are running your own discussion platforms and so on. But easiest way to solve this kind of problems is not actually any kind of monitoring tools, but having a healthy community that is monitoring itself. So if you have a good community manager, keeping your community healthy, and there are not many problems happening, it should be all good. In all cases, at some point, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon will be taxed more, meaning that price of advertisement will increase slightly on the long run, because of course when they have specific taxes targeted for them, they will move the prices up. And accessibility debate is here to stay. And if your game is accessible to everyone, it's usually a better game, so I recommend having a look on the game's accessibility guidelines anyway, although it's only required for games that are provided as part of public service. So that was a very quick overlook on what is happening on the regulatory side. So if there are any questions, comments, happy to share my ideas.
Yes, please. We do have time for about 2 questions.
If not, feel free to send me an email or contact me after the presentation.
Thanks a lot.